Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is filmmaker Hugh Gibson, whose excellent documentary The Stairs, about harm reduction workers at Toronto's Regent Park neighborhood, opens this Friday, October 7th, at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, just weeks after wowing audiences at the Toronto International Film Festival. Hugh picked Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, for reasons he'll state in the first couple of minutes of the conversation. But I can sort of see why someone who makes thoughtful, compassionate documentaries would be drawn to Nicholas Meyer's return to the property he brought so vividly to life a decade earlier in The Wrath of Khan. It has a quiet sort of dignity beneath all the campy adventure and speech-making. There's a few ideas more than the movies had offered in a while, a convoluted plot about political assassinations and states of perpetual war, and it has William Shatner and Christopher Plummer throwing Shakespeare at each other just like they did in the good old days at Stratford. It's 25 years old, but it's still pretty lively, and you're probably wondering why you haven't revisited it in a while. Well, that's why we're here. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Why did I choose Star Trek VI? Because I wanted something fun to talk about, and Norm Wilner, because I wanted you to somehow try to explain a correlation between my movie and Star Trek VI.
It's a good challenge.
I don't know. It's as a guilty pleasure. It'll do. It's always fun to listen to watch, especially with my brother. We have a lot of fun watching it together. Good memories of it. I like that there's all these references beyond, to like literature and to history. There's a lot in there and it's fun, but suspenseful. Are there better movies out there? Yes, I think you could make that argument. But it's a fun one.
It's the one that I always underestimate of the original Trek films. I mean, it...
Really?
Yeah, it breaks down pretty easily. Everybody knows the joke about the odd-numbered ones being bad and the even-numbered ones being the better ones.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's the one that, in those first six, always kind of drops back for me somehow because it feels like a television episode. Because it feels small at the same time as it feels cinematic.
Okay.
And I'm still...
Never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think it's because the stakes are relatively high, but the execution is relatively low. I mean,
you think so?
Pretty intimate film. Yeah.
Okay.
In much the same way that, you don't think about Star Trek II as a movie that plays out in 4 locations. But it is. It's the 2 ships, the space station, and the planet.
It's pretty confined.
It really is. But because it's so big, and because it's engaging with the history of the show, I guess, and because it's the first episode or installment or chapter of Star Trek that says, oh yeah, these guys have histories and emotional weight, and maybe Kirk's not as good at his job as he thinks he is.
Right.
And then with 6, I guess all the heavy lifting had been done at that point, and everyone's getting a little old, and Scotty is...
Wow, more than a little.
Yeah. By the time we got to 6, I think we were recovering from the absolute exhaustion of 5.
That's why they probably made it, right? They're like, we can't go out with that.
Yeah.
Row, row, row your boat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an awful movie.
It really is, but it also has delusions of grandeur. Like, it wants to be
you need that, I think, for it to be that bad. Like, it really needs to try, so hard and to really fall that flat.
Yeah. And so for 6, I guess when I saw it at the time in, 1991... it would have been, can't be as bad as the last one. Let's see what happens. And then it feels very, it is politically and historically active in a way that a lot of the other ones weren't. I mean, 2 sort of engages with Moby Dick and Melville, but that's as close as they get to any kind of historical allusion or allegory.
Yeah. It's like more or less Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And like that whole Horatio Hornblower type correlation with like naval tales and even the costumes as well.
Yeah, it really tacks the whole franchise in that direction.
And makes it more military as well, which I think was kind of neat. So you came at it in a very different way than I did.
I was jaundiced and cynical.
Because I might have been in grade 6, and I was not even really a Star Trek fan at that age. Okay. I enjoyed it, I guess, as a kid, but like I wouldn't say like I watched it religiously or even knew all that much about it. Kind of came to it later, but at the time it was like a big spectacle, and it was really impressive, and it was like, the special effects were impressive at the time. It was like one of those early sort of CGI movies. You got the blood, floating and zero gravity and the shapeshifter effects. And like when you're young, I mean, that's pretty cool. Personally, I think the effects hold up pretty well, relatively speaking. Yeah. I think that the action sequences are pretty good still. But for me, like, I came to Star Trek, like, to take it more seriously much later. So, like, my first year at university was in 2000, and I was at York, and there was, like, a big strike. I know it's hard to imagine, but pretty early on in my first year, and a lot of my friends had, like, moved away to other, cities and stuff, and I was living at home. I didn't know anyone yet at York. So basically I was like, at home for long stretches with not much to do. And I would watch, at night I would go to Cinematheque. And I remember like they had a Godard series on. I was probably at Cinematheque like, I don't know. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say like 4 nights a week, maybe even 5. Right. Seeing like all the Godard movies. Claire Denis, I think they had a Claire Denis series, things like that. Oh, yeah. But in the day, Star Trek TNG was on. Not even the original series, which I don't necessarily like all that much. I think that it's really dated and so on. But really TNG, I really liked a lot. Or I started to like revisit it and like start to see that like, as a kid I wouldn't have picked up on how clever the writing is. And I started to like sort of take it more seriously and see like, wow, there's actually like a lot going on here, and like so many of the episodes are about like death and loss and dealing with big subjects, and it was really, really interesting. Even an episode like I'm trying to remember which one it is, The Outcast. If you think of that one about like Riker,
that was the genderless planet.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like this monologue about like. Being an outcast for like, loving someone of another gender, and as a kid you wouldn't pick up, or you wouldn't probably understand, like, or I wouldn't have understood, like, this is about like, gay issues. But I think about at the time, that I think that was probably like quite a bold move, or maybe a show of its kind.
Well, that was certainly as close as they could get to acknowledging any kind of same-sex or trends. I mean, I'm not even sure what pocket you would fit that in, but it covers all of it. It was, I just wrote this in the Now piece a couple of weeks ago. Like, Star Trek was the first It Gets Better, I think, more or less, because even if it wasn't on a sexual continuum, it told the bookish kids that sports isn't the end of it. There's a future out there, and you'll be required. You'll be helpful then. Yeah. It was hugely important to me as a kid growing up. I grew up on the original series because I'm old, and saw it in reruns in the 70s when I came home from school. I remember, this is so embarrassing, but I remember not understanding, because I'm just too young to remember the moon landing, and the Apollo program was winding down by the time I was sort of conscious of stuff. So 5 or 6 years old, I remember being shocked that Star Trek wasn't like real, like that it wasn't. That it didn't equate to where we were at the time. I just assumed that all the cool stuff was off in space, and we were here on Earth. We were the maintenance planet. We were just waiting for stuff to come back. And then somebody, probably my father or mother, very gently broke it to me that that we're not traveling between planets yet, and we don't have alien races, and none of this is real. And then we saw 2001. It's like, oh well, you're just lying to me, because all of this stuff is clearly happening. But
I used to think that the Spider-Man cartoon. Oh, how did they film that? Well, what's he holding on to when he's swinging from all those buildings?
Really? I've never...
The magic of cinema.
Yeah. I never had a problem distinguishing animation from live action.
Well,
but I've heard of a lot of people who...
generational thing, maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not the first person who said that. It's just the way you receive it, I guess.
Yeah, and this is last year. No, I might have been like, I don't know, 7 or something.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I believe you. And the fact that the original Star Trek was really heavy-handed in their allegories. Mm-hmm. Like the racism with the black, white, and white, black, and all that.
Frank Gorshin.
Yeah, that played for me as a kid because it was so obvious that I could very easily understand it. Mm-hmm. Like when you're 6, it's like, oh, right, I get it. They're silly. I can't imagine what an adult would have experienced in 1966 or 67 watching this, like, really, this is how you're going to deal with racism? But the show has always been really good the franchise has always been really good at incorporating things. Even, J.J. Abrams sort of deals with the post 9/11 world, with the militarization of Star Trek in his movies. And Into Darkness is all about the idea of striking back at a threat that's from within and all that stuff. Yeah. But the thing about the Undiscovered Country is that it really engages with the moment, the political moment at the time, like Glasnost and everything.
Totally.
It's a straight metaphor, but it kind of paves the way with that remarkable Vulcan proverb, only Nixon could go to China.
Yeah.
And I remember the whole room just sort of snickering and then really laughing, like taking a second because we're all processing that joke in our way. It's like, oh, that's dumb. No, wait, actually the Vulcans would say something like that. They would be aware of it. But it was the first time, a friend of mine used to say that there was a formula in Star Trek in the show, in the original series. Gag was, you would have, Lincoln, Kennedy, Bill from Mars. They'd always throw in one future thing.
Right.
But with this, they really just acknowledged in a strange way that history is always influencing us. And the movies currently really only deal with it through pop culture, with the Beastie Boys coming back here and there, classical music.
This is radio. I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah, it works for me. I love the idea. I love the idea that, 400 years from now, in the world of Star Trek, the only things that persist are the weird 40s tunes that Leonard Nimoy put in Search for Spock. Like there's I Remember You is in there and a couple of Johnny Mercer pieces. And then the Beastie Boys. And nothing else has survived. Or Star Trek 4 line about Harold Robbins, Jacqueline Collins. Oh, the Giants. The literature of your time is not the literature of the future when they look back. But with 6, there's this weird feeling that they are summing a lot of things up. So they want to deal with the Klingons and put the pieces in place for what will be happening in Next Generation, which was already underway. And it had been for a couple of seasons, right?
I like that they do that in this film. Like, they don't just sort of, it's like a victory lap film, basically, off the heels of an awful one. But they tried to extend the storyline, of the series and turn the enemy into something new and I think try things with the series which were interesting. Yeah. Even if they were things that they tried before, like about aging and, it works pretty well, I think. But if you go back and look at Wrath of Khan, it's like a lot of the same stuff. And oh, we're getting old.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was back in, 10 years ago.
You're older.
We made that film. Yeah.
Yeah.
But all this stuff about the Cold War, I think is pretty interesting. It's funny that you say that about the new films. Maybe I won't shit all over them, but I don't like the new films, to be honest. I feel like they really got away from what I like best, specifically about TNG, but this idea of exploring big themes and science fiction. It's really about the present day or history, right? To me, that's what the great science fiction is. It's not really about the future. Star Trek, yes, of course, there's a sort of a utopian vision for humanity, which I think is interesting too. But I mean, really, science fiction, it's about talking about today and history, and I do see that a lot in Star Trek 6, and sometimes it's in subtle ways, if it's the Christopher Plummer, with the eye patch, which I guess is from a Israeli general from the 6-Day War.
Yeah, Moshe Dayan.
Yeah, or
although of course in the Klingons' case they have nailed it into his head, which is my single favorite piece of production design.
It's amazing
because that's Klingon.
Yeah,
that's
of course.
They're not going to you don't get to take it off. You just wear your honor, right? You just How do you replace
And
the
his
eye? Oh,
hairstyle.
you don't do that. Just hammer something onto him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
I
sorry.
mean, we should see that more, shouldn't we? Or like when they're in the trial scene and, they have the, don't wait for the translation, the Adlai Stevenson thing.
Yeah.
From the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like little touches like that. I don't think that you would see those in the new films.
Yeah.
And I think that you got to give credit to the director, who's an interesting guy, someone who has a lot of interest in literature and who had made interesting stuff about Sherlock Holmes. He wrote The 7% Solution, or Time After Time with Jack the Ripper and H.G. Wells. Things like this. And
Nicholas Meyer is an absolutely fascinating filmmaker.
He really is.
Just never got his due.
No.
Oh, that's right, because he's working on the new series too.
Is he?
Yeah, it says he is.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Directed The Day After. Forgot about that.
Yeah, we should talk about The Day After.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one that I only watched kind of recently for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. It's fucking crazy.
It is,
It's really upsetting.
Yeah.
I was upset watching it now.
Yeah,
I can't imagine watching it
I saw it
in 86 or whenever
83.
it was. Wow.
Fall of 83, I would have been, I think it was the fall, it might have been the spring, but I would have been 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simultaneously melodramatic and terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you could sort of see how incredibly uncomfortable the medium of drama is to the apocalypse, at least then.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the 1 hour point before the missiles start flying, you're already just in a squirming, uncomfortable position.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this 2-minute war sequence, which is kind of cheesy, like the X-rays and stuff. But
Yeah.
you just have to, you have to abstract it. You can't just show absolute destruction. I mean, you can now, I suppose. But at the time, that was the only way that you could make it palatable. And then at the very end, I remember that little lead where it says, we only use 20 kiloton bombs because if we used 20 megaton bombs, there'd be no story to tell. There'd be no survivors at all.
I didn't remember that part.
Yeah, I remember it. Seared into my... And then a few years later, I saw Threads.
I don't know that one.
That was the British version.
Okay.
Which apparently I'm on record, someone quoted me, and I think it's a great line, and I'd love to take credit for it. I don't remember saying it. But Threads is what The Day After has nightmares about.
Oh, Jesus.
Because it's absolutely... it's a kitchen sink British treatment of the apocalypse. That and Testament, I think, are the two...
Don't know that one either.
Nobody remembers Testament.
Yeah, Day After.
Got it.
And it ends with, I think they play Waltzing Matilda, like a reference to On the Beach.
Oh,
which to me is still arguably the most depressing movie ever made.
That's right. It's
Like,
the one that ends with the hopeful message that no one will ever read.
Yeah. Oh man, just The Day After, holy fuck! Do you remember they shoot that family trying to help people?
Oh,
It's
that's
it's
right.
so dark. It's so oppressively brutal. It's this was on network TV in the early 80s.
Yeah, the second half ran without commercials. It was a big deal.
Wow,
You were just stuck there with
wow.
it. Yeah. No, there really wasn't anything. I mean, there was people. Yeah, when people.
Steve Guttenberg is in it.
That's right. Goes bald and takes the hat off to show the scalp, the spots. They all gonna die.
Not Gutenberg.
Yeah, the goots. But people do not know. It's not a question of remembering. People born post 1990 really don't remember or understand what it was like to not know that everything was going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, terrorism is much more minimalized. It's scary, and I guess that's the thing that makes me feel old more than anything else, is that, I mean, when I was 12, I might not have been 13. There was an unawareness that everything was on a hair trigger, and Reagan upping the rhetoric in the early 80s, there was a genuine sense of apocalypse in the air. Movies like The Day After and Testament, and there was a found footage thing called Special Bulletin that nobody remembers either. It was shot on video. Ed Swick directed it. It was 1982, I think. And it was a network broadcast of a nuclear incident, of an incident of terrorism where a bunch of eco-nerds had built a bomb and were trying to threaten the government into shutting down a nuclear plant with their bomb. It was the fight fire with fire thing. And it's genuinely unnerving to watch this stuff and think, it's not so far from possible. now it's the stuff of science fiction and movies like The Undiscovered Country that deal with, I mean, basically insurrection and attempts by governments to undermine their own peace process. That's
bit of a 7 Days in May
Yeah.
thing about it.
That's
I
the
like
sort
that
of
at the
thing that-
beginning where like the good guys are villainized, and you have like, I can't remember if they use this, but like Brock Peters was supposed to give this like very sort of, you know, horrible account of, you know, what the Klingons are and they should all be eliminated. Well, Kirk says something like that, and it's like, oh geez, like really? And it's like, look at ourselves, you know, with a little bit of distance, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we're still doing it now in
Yeah.
terms of demonizing God. Americans are demonizing other Americans now. It's just easier than listening.
Yeah.
And the common humanity of alien species is something that barely enters into it. But it's not the first time, I guess, that Star Trek has used science fiction to discuss the fear of the other. Certainly, I mean, they've been doing it on The Next Generation a lot. But it was a weird way of engaging with the material that previously couldn't be confronted head on, I think, not in science fiction, but in Star Trek, in that thing, in the idea that the cancer might be inside the Federation, that it might be a human failing, instead of the standard Roddenberry line of optimism will win the day and everything's going to be great and don't worry that there aren't any gay people, we'll get around to that eventually. Like that weird thing he had.
Right.
That only now, 50 years later, is there going to be... Can there be a gay character in Star Trek? And first they had to retcon it by making it Sulu, which is fine. I like that. But also...
Who, by the way, is amazing at the beginning as the captain. You know, that's a great
Takei
opening.
in Star Trek 6. Yeah, George Takei doesn't get enough credit for actually creating that character.
That's a really good opening, I gotta say. You know, and starting with the music like in a different way than the other films, and like just
and
sort of subverting
right?
expectations.
That first opening is actually shocking. I remember the audience going when it happened theatrically when Praxis explodes.
Yes, exactly, Praxis.
I remember stuff.
An incident.
Yes. But the idea, too, that you're seeing these characters in a way that you haven't seen before, that's new, I think, for this film. The idea that after the trilogy of 2, 3, and 4, which I do think is the sort of high point of old Trek, because it is...
3? A high point? I don't know. That's being generous.
You need 3 to get to 4. Like that's the way I see it. It is absolutely not the best one. But after
well, you're absolutely right.
But after 2 gives you the mythology and the stature for the first time, all connecting properly, because Star Trek: The Motion Picture is about looking at things in awe, but not looking at our characters in awe. Right? They're just.
I think it's about falling asleep in awe. Maybe.
Well, there's that too. But within the context of the film, it's wow. This is all so spectacular, and no one's doing anything. And then 2 comes along, and it is spectacular, but we also have human connections and characters that we are engaged with. And then 3 is the episode. 3 is the TV series version, where it's like, oh, that's right, there's bickering, and there's silliness, and Spock's not there, so there's a hole in it. And let's figure it all out. There's a planet, and stuff is happening, and by the end of it, we're where we should be for the next movie.
Right.
And then you get 4, which is this... literally the voyage home, where you get to reconnect to all the things that you love about Star Trek, and by the end of that, all the pieces are back together. And it could have ended there. Yeah. Because 5 makes you wish it had. And then 6 comes along and it's like, hey, we're actually going to end it the way you think it should be ended, using the weight of everything, all this stuff that's been built up. Here we are. Let's do it right. Let's have a TV version, a movie version of a TV show that feels like the show. And let's enjoy ourselves, and also here's some Shakespeare.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get to some Shakespeare. And I guess they wanted to call Wrath of Khan
The
Undiscovered Country, right?
That was a title that Meyer had been trying to use for years.
Yeah, and they shot him down. But,
because it was going to be the vengeance of Khan as well. Like, I
think they changed it because of Empire Strikes Back, something like that.
Well, Revenge of the Jedi.
Oh, right.
Was the next one. But that's the great thing about the Star Trek 2 subtitle, is that it gets less sophisticated. It just keeps... It's not dumbing
it's good
down.
to have wrath in a title once in a while.
Yeah, how descriptive is... Well, is he seeking vengeance? Well, he's really just wrathful. Okay, Wrath of Khan. Do that. The
Day of Wrath, Wrath of Khan. It's a good subgenre.
Yeah. But the Undiscovered Country would work for 2 because in that case, the Undiscovered Country is failure, is Kirk being forced to confront his own shortcomings as a captain, which is the thing that, the show never did it. Star Trek The Motion Picture, he's an admiral, never mind. Like, he's the best that there is. And 2 is like, you don't always think things through and kind of half-assed it. You have a kid, you accidentally murdered a whole bunch of people by leaving them on this planet that went terribly wrong. You're not good at your job.
You're lucky you haven't had to face your own mortality.
Yeah. And it just hits all at once. And I think that's why I love 2 the most, is because it's the only movie where, like, Shatner's performance reads like a performance. Like Kirk is fronting the actor. And he's forced to confront that, which is so great. And then by 6, he's humbled and wiser and still trying really hard not to be mature because he doesn't want to be the peacemaker. He wants to keep his hate, which is the character that keeps me going in that film, because otherwise it could have been a really stiff allegory for glasnost and U.S.-Russia relations. But instead you have a man who, I don't want to have to start seeing these creatures as human or as my equal. I want to hate. It's easier. And that's really interesting.
It reminds me of one of the best Twilight Zone episodes that actually George Takei's in. I forget what it's called, but it's like 2 guys are stuck in like an attic. Do you know this one where it's like one of them was a US GI and the other one is George Takei, very young George Takei, and he's like the Japanese gardener, and basically they're locked in this attic and they are basically hashing out all the post-war traumas of, you seem like a good guy, but I've been taught to hate you, for all these years.
I do know this one.
I think it was actually like banned. I think it was the one episode that they weren't allowed to air, but you can get it now on DVD, and it's really dark, and the American guy especially, I forget the actor's name, but it's one of these character actors. He always plays like a slob or an idiot or
Broderick Crawford kind of guy.
Sort of, yeah. He's in, funny enough, I think he's in Tora.
That makes sense.
But he's really like a jerk.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people would have like objected to that. But he's also torn. He knows he's supposed to feel, a certain way now that things are different, but he can't. And
so what's the twist? They're both Lithuanian.
Now the twist, well, for those, spoiler alert. No, there's a samurai sword that one of them took off, that the American guy took off a Japanese soldier that he killed, in the war or wherever, Okinawa or whatever, and Takei's has it, and he's like, I'm gonna kill him, and they have to try to not kill each other, and then Takei does kill him with the sword, and then he jumps out the window and kills himself. Yeah, that's the end.
Like a Twilight Zone episode.
And there's it's one of the few where there's only sort of the thinnest strand of any sort of fantasy or science fiction. Just these barely.
I'm fascinated.
It's really interesting. It's captivating.
Huh.
Yeah, there's only one other Twilight Zone episode that's like that, where there's no sort of fantasy. But I don't know, maybe we digress. With the guy, they make this bet. These 2 guys are at this club, and one of them's like a gentleman's club, basically, for rich folk.
Right.
And one of them's boasting. This young guy's boasting, and then this other older guy's like, I can't get any peace. I'm gonna make a bet with you for some enormous sum of money that you can't keep your mouth shut for 1 year. And they make this bet at the beginning, and typical Twilight Zone fashion. There's a nice twist, but yeah, it's worth seeing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, and that type of storytelling was much more acceptable in the 50s and in the 60s. It's in Star Trek as well, where irony isn't irony. It's just a big kind of womp womp moment where you're forced to, we want to make sure everybody gets this message, which again is why I played for kids. Why you win over this young audience that embraces the concept. But you have to be more sophisticated as time goes on and as you get older, as the audience ages, but also what played in 1967 won't play in 1991. So you can have, it's fun to have the reversal of, well, you don't really appreciate Shakespeare until you hear him in the original Klingon.
Which I guess was a thing that, like, the Nazis used to say.
It was a Chekhov joke in the 60s. Everything was from Russia.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, well, the idea of
I thought it was like a Mephisto thing
a
that,
little,
like,
maybe.
Weimar Republic used to say.
It's probably borrowed from that.
Yeah.
Because, of course, in the 60s, the communists were monolithic. They took away all outside influence. And so the idea, I assume, in Star Trek, they figured that communism would never fall. So Chekhov is supposedly from that world where he's always like, everything is Russian. This is not. You speak of this John Wesley Harding, like that kind of thing. This Bob Dylan was, of course, a Soviet agent. Everything came back to the original Russian.
Yeah.
And the Klingons perpetuating that in a weird way brings it back home, because the original allegory is that they're the Russians, or the central allegory of 6 is that they're the Russians. So the Klingons are weirdly reclaiming the bit that Chekhov did in the 60s, but that they had to drop because, of course, that's no longer the case. And you'll notice, like, in the new films, they've had a really interesting time sort of figuring out what to do with Chekhov. Just make him really enthusiastic, because he can't lean back on Mother Russia anymore, because that is no longer a concern. Like, the present-day audience won't get that, so you just have to take it out. And now, of course, with Anton Yelchin's death, they've said that Chekhov simply won't be part of the future Trek movies, which I guess is the right way to do it. You can't really recast that part.
I don't know.
He was very good at it. But we've wandered very far away from the Undiscovered Country.
It's good to divert, I think.
People love the digressions.
I love all the Sherlock Holmes references. That's something that I really love about, I guess, that movie in particular. And
well, it's Nicholas Meyer.
Totally.
Right? Like, he loves that stuff.
Oh, man. And just like, you made me, because I really dislike the new Star Trek reboots. I really dislike the new Sherlock Holmes as well.
Oh, which one? The Benedict Cumberbatch one?
Yeah, I can't stand it.
It's funny. I loved the first year. The first 3 episodes all felt really fun and light and fleet. And now it's just, Stephen Moffat has just disappeared once again up his own genius, and this weird self-satisfaction that runs through all of them is just killing it for me.
It's like a CSI thing. It's like the whole idea of Sherlock Holmes is like applying logic and the scientific method from that era to, like,
mysteries. Beat
your opponents and solve the mystery, and it's about using your intellect, not like gadgets and stuff. Like, what the hell is that? I don't know. I couldn't get past that.
Have you watched?
And also, I grew up watching the Jeremy Brett,
right, the BBC
series, which I just love, and which I think holds up extremely well. And I feel like you can't really get any better than that.
Yeah,
I can watch those over and over and over again.
Period treatments of Holmes, or not period treatments of Holmes. All Holmes should be in period, but the earlier versions of Holmes, like even the Basil Rathbone films, they work because they feel old and creaky somehow. And the Jeremy Brett stuff is shot on video, and it doesn't look that convincing, but it still feels more authentic than a present-day treatment.
Well, he's amazing. Like, that's for me anyway, like one of the great, like, lead performances in any series. He's incredible. I mean, at the height of the show, before he got he had illnesses and, that stuff. But also, like, the supporting casts are incredible, and the level of actors they got, and the scripts, and even like some of the directors, like John Madden directed a number of episodes, and they're just extremely well done, and the attention to detail, and how faithful it is to the show, but also improving on the original source material, which is, it's hit and miss in my opinion. If you want to have fun, my idea of fun, of like you ever go on a road trip, is like get Sherlock Holmes stories, like you can get them read by like Christopher Lee. That's really fun.
That would be good.
Or by Edward Hardwicke, who plays Watson in most of that series.
Yeah, you want to cast for Watson though. Like, Lee is almost too intimidating to be reading.
Oh, but he's great. Yeah. And he does all the voices anyway. Yeah. Great voice.
I think
God is the Bond.
I do think that Martin Freeman's Watson is one of the pleasures of the new Sherlock, although... And I don't mind Cumberbatch. My problem is with the plotting and the narrative more than the actual performances.
Yeah.
It's...
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And I haven't watched it that much, so...
Yeah. And with Meyer, with the 7% solution, like he really took pleasure in presenting that relationship straight. Like there are no... It's not a winking kind of adaptation. There's no meta text to it. It simply is a Sherlock Holmes story that's really... Just it knows the characters. It's really invested in who they are and what they do, and then it adds Freud, which is just delightful. But that's where you get the commentary.
And Christopher Plummer's in it too, right?
Yeah,
I want to say.
I think so.
Yeah,
it's right here.
And he is so good in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, and I am a big Christopher Plummer fan.
Yes. Again, he won't.
And I went and saw him. Really?
I tried to interview. Well, I did interview him once, and I tried to bring it up, and he wasn't hostile to it, but I think he saw it as play acting.
Right.
You know, he just didn't want to. But you were in makeup and having so much fun. Let's talk about it. And he's pretty grumpy. I think he spent so much time talking about movies he doesn't really respect.
I think he hated The Sound of Music,
legendary
right?
hate on for The Sound of Music.
I can get with.
Oh, I don't blame him at all.
Yeah, I find that unwatchable.
But I think after 40 years of Sound of Music, you hate talking about that. I think he's just gotten very defensive about anything other than the thing he's talking about right this moment.
Yeah.
But I would love to talk to him.
I can respect that, actually.
Yeah. But
I've seen him a bunch of times at Stratford. I saw him do King Lear. It was fucking amazing. Antony and Cleopatra. And The Tempest as well. Where you got a little Star Trek crossover. Our Rebels Never Ended. Yeah. Never sounded better, I'm telling you.
I'd love to see that.
But yeah, that was really special. Yeah. So yeah, a bit of a Stratford throwback. I guess that Shatner, I think, understudied for Plummer at one point at Stratford.
Each other's utility player here and there.
To me, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
And there's so many. This is another thing. There's so many Canadian actors. It's like a high degree of CanCon in this movie, right? Kim Cattrall.
Right. Oh, I forgot about Valeris. You know the story, right? Like
it's supposed to be the same. Yeah, Savick.
It was supposed to be Savick to the point where there were screenplays on set with Savick crossed out and Valeris written in.
Wow.
Yeah, that must be terrible for.
So could they not get Kirstie Alley? Oh, I guess they'd already recast.
Yeah, it was
part,
Robin Curtis in 3 and briefly in 4, I think. I think ultimately it was just decided that Meyer wanted to do it with Kirstie Alley, and he wanted to bring her back and have her be the betrayer.
Well, that would have been interesting.
It would have been.
From a casting point of view.
But she was doing Cheers then, and...
Possibly Look Who's Talking?
Just uninterested. Yeah, she either couldn't do it or didn't want to do it, but it was never going to happen. So they got Kim Cattrall, who... she's kind of struggling with it. I mean, it's not her fault.
Right.
It's a hard role to play, and the look they gave her is just incredibly unflattering. Her head looks 3 sizes too big with that haircut, and the ears, like the bowl cut shaped over the ears just doesn't work for her. And so you're watching pieces of Star Trek legend that aren't right? Like it's like watching a knockoff version of something, because there's no question she's supposed to be Savick.
Right.
And because of that glaring disconnect, there's no question she's behind it. Like it's one of those things where it's like
the whole movie's like that. It's like it's so obvious who the bad guys are.
Yeah, it's not going to be a
thing's going to be. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that's the problem with the enemy within principle of any of these stories, is that the franchise is so rooted in these characters that you can't suddenly have someone have been evil all along, right? Like you can't do it with the Marvel movies, you can't do it with the DC movies, you certainly can't do it with Star Wars or Star Trek. You're not allowed to violate that. And if I remember thinking at the time, like, wow, Chekhov would have a hate on for these guys. They're stealing his bit. What if that was part of it? What if he had a completely realistic motivation based on nationalism and communism, and if they'd carried forward with that, then the logical endpoint of this thing is that he would really not like this. And it has to be the new kid. Like it can never be, Or, in Into Darkness, where the true villain is the Federation all along because they've been militarizing even further since the events of the first movie, and this is where we lead. And it's like, yes, I get it, but it has to be somebody new. It's still Commodore Peter Weller. It can't be somebody from the last movie even.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it's going to end. Same as in probably any of these franchise movies. So the key for me is, like, you got to have a really good villain or villains. I think that, like, any of these franchise type or series type movies, whether it's superheroes or the sci-fi or whatever, it for me, it always lives and dies by the villain. Mm-hmm. If you have a great villain, to me, that's, like, the most important thing. Someone you can root for, someone who's funny, who's, like, actually evil, and ideally you have Christopher Plummer or someone of that ilk playing him or her, and you also got Iman, who's like fucking badass.
That's
like
right.
She's great, and this whole idea of a shapeshifter and some of the cool effects, cool for that era. I think it's still kind of neat. Or like you got the two Shatners and sort of like playing on his personas and egomaniac and so on.
And I guess maybe that's one of the reasons it feels like a TV episode to me. One of the reasons it felt more like the old show is because it's not afraid to go for the hoary stuff and be just like, well, this is pretty lame, but it's awful. It's also
it knows
really
what it
funny.
is. I mean, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's able to make fun of itself.
Yeah, and after the Final Frontier, there is no
just
bottom.
Basically humorless.
Yeah, but it was trying to be funny, which was the weird part.
Wow.
It's weird and folksy, and it's not funny. It doesn't land. Everything feels stiff and awkward. And here, at least, there is just the sense
doesn't land, especially when he's falling off the Yosemite thing.
I have flying boots.
I mean, that would have been great if he just died at the beginning.
Well, it certainly would have let Shatner.
That would be the final frontier.
You could focus on directing. That would be fun.
Well, would it be fine?
Well, it certainly would have paid more.
The children have to learn about tech wars sometime.
No, they don't. No, they don't. We can keep them innocent.
I think that scene in When Jews Were Funny about Shatner and about like how the traffic on the DVP is like, what does he say? It's Holocausty.
Yeah.
Some quote about William Shatner.
Yeah.
I think that's like kind of spoiled Shatner for me in a way.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, or I mean, I was listening to Nicholas Meyer talk about like his method of directing for Star Trek VI and how he directed Shatner, and basically he would let Shatner tire himself out, let him do like the first number of takes and do his version, and then he would kind of get tired and then bring it down to something that you could actually use on film.
That's amazing. It's the Kubrick method. You just exhaust your actor until they are normal.
So there you go.
So they stop emphasizing. Kevin Pollak once shared with me the secret to the Shatner impersonation, which is amazing, which is very simple. He said, it's all pronouns. You emphasize you don't understand, we are human beings. If you put the pauses in after the pronouns and you hit them hard, I have a mission. It is all about. I'm turning to Walken too. But the amazing thing about Shatner is that the delivery is like, you must, you, I, we, the ship out of danger.
Don't trust them.
Yeah, it's all about hitting every. Kiefer Sutherland's approach to Jack Bauer was that every sentence he is saying is the most important sentence he will ever say. And he said, that's how you get through 24 with your energy up. You go into a coma afterwards. But as an actor, like it's all
like a National Theatre School thing.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland.
It's all coming out of you. Be intense and in the moment. And Shatner seems to think that, but also that he's relaxed and snappy and witty. And I've interviewed him a couple of times, once in person and once by phone. And in person, he's great. He's relaxed. He's funny. He's in his element. He knows exactly what he's playing to. And on the phone, he's just this weird, disconnected, snippy. Are we done now? Is that enough for you? It's like, okay. Monologuer. Which is a shame, because, kids never meet your heroes, especially if they're starship captains. Although that's not fair, because Patrick Stewart is a delight.
In person, you mean?
Both, yeah.
He's amazing. I mean, have you seen him in Christmas Carol?
Oh, God. I got him to autograph my CD.
Really?
I'm such a nerd.
I feel like that's so overrated. I think that show, it's like a TV movie, but that is a great movie.
Overrated. Oh, underrated.
Underrated. Way underrated.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. Again, the cast, we're really going off on a tangent now, but that's...
Star Trek is a broad universe. No, but listen to the audio
Christmas Carol. 2 thumbs up.
His audio recording of it. It started as a one-man stage.
Yeah, and he did it on stage. I really wish I had seen that at some point.
Yeah, me too.
You're that boy. What day is it? Why, it's Christmas Day, sir.
Yes. The one as big as me. He's amazing. I actually got to see him do Pinter.
Really?
With Ian McKellen.
Wow.
When they were doing 2 plays in rep a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe 3 years ago now.
Was this in London or New York?
Yeah, they're actually taking it to London. I think they're performing it right now.
They did Godot too, right?
Yeah, that was the other play. We couldn't get tickets to that. But Kate and I were there for Thanksgiving and we rushed it. And we got tickets to the court the day after Thanksgiving. It's the Friday night. Wow. And it was kind of remarkable. Because Pinter... it's a very precise, dramatic form, and the two of them, McKellen and Stewart's they didn't give a shit. They're just going to go in and do it, and they were great. There was no attempt to respect it, just to play it, and not that they disrespected it, but it was great. And then Billy Crudup and Skylar Hensley were fine. They were secondary characters. But I talked to Crudup about it a couple of years later, and he was like, "Yeah, I was just happy to be there. I was just in awe."
Yeah, wouldn't you be?
Exactly. Yeah, but then. There is this weird thing throughout Star Trek, and which is why I'm really curious to see what Brian Fuller does with this new thing, to create, you cast above the show's weight. You cast, because at the time Shatner was he wasn't really well known or anything, but he did have a big stage history. He was respected as an actor.
He was in a lot of the Twilight Zone. That was another thing.
Yeah,
going back to that.
There's an affinity to genre too.
Judgment at Nuremberg, he has an impressive resume back then.
With Corman on The Intruder, things like that. But he was he could do anything.
Yeah,
and so
he's in Alfred Hitchcock Presents too. I want to say, I don't know, maybe.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Don't quote me.
Yeah, but he was in a bunch of stuff plus, a little bit of sci-fi, and. With the same with Patrick Stewart, right? He'd done Dune and Life Force. No one remembers that he was in them, but you see the movies, it's like, holy shit, that's Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
But he was a virtual unknown when he was cast in Trek, as far as American pop culture would go. But then to see those two worlds sort of colliding, because the other thing about the Undiscovered Country is that it has, Worf's grandfather, and a pre-Deep Space Nine Rene Auberjonois in the deleted scene.
Yes.
That was restored to video. I assume you would have seen that version every time, right? Like Colonel North.
Right.
That weird Oliver North joke where, again, I totally get why it was cut, because it tips it just a little bit further into present day relevance. We have to have this extra secret CIA plan thing going on, and then they simply remove the scene at the end where the mask is pulled off and it was Auberjonois under that, because the theatrical version, it wasn't him. It's just a Klingon.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that revelation is
seriously?
Cut. Yeah, that's what Meyer put.
Okay, I didn't remember that. I thought it was always him.
No, theatrical cut had no Auberjonois whatsoever.
Huh.
Because I guess it's an extra. Because I suppose if they'd cut the earlier scene, the 3 minutes of him explaining their secret plan, and just had, hey, Rene Auberjonois was under there the whole time, that would make no sense. So they had to cut the reveal. Who
appeared memorably in this year's Kelly Reichardt film,
That's right.
Certain Women.
Yep.
That was good to see him.
Yeah, he's cool. And McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which comes out on Criterion
very
soon. Yeah. He actually,
what a guy.
He accidentally leaked that. I mean, we all kind of suspected it was going to happen, but he said, just tweeted out of the blue, Criterion just interviewed me for McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and everybody's like, Criterion's doing McCabe, and then a couple of weeks later, it's like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that.
Someone was telling me the other day that he has nobility in his lineage.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, he seems kind of regal, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got good bones. He's got the bearing.
So to me, getting back to this thing about the elements that you need for a good movie like this, where you basically know exactly how it's going to end. They're going to have the little clapping moment at the end, and the sappy music and whatever else. There's not going to be really any big surprises, but you need good villains, and the supporting cast around as well.
Yeah, we haven't
And
really
as well
given enough credit to the Seven Dwarfs, as Shatner referred to his co-stars, for many, many years until they got him to stop.
But I mean, like, the sort of smaller characters that sort of, I don't know, make up, I don't know.
So we're not talking about...
Well, Amon it would be one, but, you know, you got Kurtwood Smith and heavy makeup.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
You Brock Peters, you know.
David
not that they have a lot
Warner
to do, but...
Umpteenth Star Trek role.
David Warner, David Warner, exactly.
Who, again, I just love the idea that Nicholas Meyer insists on casting him, even though he was just in the last one.
Yeah.
In a different role.
Oh, yeah.
But Chancellor... And the other thing I really liked about this one is this is the film where they don't even try to give the Klingons names. They're just like Gorkon, Krang, because they're weird sounding names, and they've already started to, like, Worf. That's sort of a cool Klingon name.
Yeah,
Worf is all right.
It's all right.
But then, you know, like, Gorkon just sounds like a measurement of time in another science fiction series, and General Krang, why not?
Is that one of them? Sounds like the Ninja Turtles.
Isn't Krang the character that... Or is it Chang?
Chang. I think it's Chang. Right, yeah.
And Chang isn't even trying. Like, it's just...
Well, I like that they don't have...
The Fu Manchu mustache he's wearing. Just give him a Chinese name. Let's go with that.
I like that I think Plummer insisted on, like, I don't want to speak Klingon. I don't want to have to learn this gibberish. And, like, why would you hire Christopher Plummer, like, to speak Klingon as well? So they invent this, like, thing where they're speaking through the translator. It doesn't really make sense, but it's like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It's Star Trek 6.
Why
it's
would
Christopher Plummer.
Yeah, we've had universal translators on the show for 30 years. You might as well just keep playing with that.
Totally.
But Plummer, he comes with his own rules. He's going to play it like he wants to play it.
I mean, wouldn't you let him do basically what he wants?
Yeah. That's the one regret is that there isn't more for him and Shatner to just play.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose what they're doing is playful. They're so committed to these roles that, you know, the kind of thing that's going on constantly. It is a bit ridiculous. But I needed, you know what, there is no scene where the thing that you need the most in any Glasnost allegory, I think, is a scene where the enemies get together and just get shit-faced.
But that's the dinner scene where they get drunk.
It just doesn't go far enough, I guess. Like, it cuts away. I wanted the whole
That
thing.
works for the story, though. You want it at the end? A reconciliation. You want Patton, basically.
Actually,
where they're like, you're an asshole. I'll drink to that. Or whatever.
I maybe wouldn't mind that. I mean, if you're going to send them off into their...
Pre-Cold War.
Yeah, send them off into their perfect signatures in space kind of ending. Let's send them off with a buzz.
Yeah.
The
signatures.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I mean, it's silly, but it did feel like they were literally signing off. To the point where when Generations comes along a few years later, it's like, well... You know, we never told you how Kirk died. So it doesn't matter. He went off into space with his friends. That's how it's supposed to go. And then you just feel like this extra piece of bridge building, literally, is happening in the new movie because there has to be a handoff. But there really doesn't.
Totally.
Like, Star Trek 6 is the handoff. Yeah. There's an acknowledgement that the future is coming. You've got hints.
The little Kittimer thing in Star Trek 6 carries over. Yeah. It came like at the height. Would you say like it came at the height of TNG's kind of popularity?
Definitely, it was at the peak of the show. Yeah, creatively, I think. Because then the seasons 4 and 5 were kind of the high point, and then it tapers off well. But it's also like season 6 and 7 are kind of a victory lap as well. Who knows? Perhaps we ourselves are just little bots on a machine in someone's table. Stop it!
Oh, and they get into Sherlock Holmes and TNG as well.
Yeah.
Which is enjoyable.
It was, like, this is the way that I mean, there's a reason Generations isn't in the box set that we're looking at here, the Star Trek Original Motion Picture Collection. Generations is the, hey, we got some of the actors to come back. Let's do this. And Shatner told me, like, he said the only way he'd do it is if they let him ride a horse. So they came up with a reason. It's like, were you trying to dare them into not hiring you? Is that what you were doing? I want to ride a horse in space.
Didn't he get pissed off that he wasn't in the reboots, though?
I think later he is, yeah. He felt that he should be... I mean, obviously he feels like he should be part of everything. That's William Shatner. But it's not like... I think they probably went with Nimoy because it makes more sense to have Spock in the reboot, because if you're going to do time travel and throw someone back, it has to be someone who can handle it. You know, like if Kirk goes back in time, he's going to try to fix everything. And Spock gets there and goes, "Oh, shit's fucked up. I guess I can't do anything about it. Well, let's go lead New Vulcan." I'm cool with that.
Maybe Nimoy just aged better as well.
Which is also
on camera.
Yeah. Well, plus we've killed Kirk, so.
Well, you got that too.
If you're going to sustain the continuity,
what does that mean though?
It's true. I think the only way, it's that weird Vulcan thing where the lifespan is long enough that he's lived into the next generation, which lets all of us nerds go, well, those adventures still happened. Then they were unwritten by time travel, but they're all still real. Canon is maintained.
Roll my eyes at that whole thing and blowing up Vulcan. And...
We need to have a continuity in our heads. Canon is really important. But I didn't mind the blowing up Vulcan. I don't mind the direction that they've taken it in because it feels like it's relevant to current.
I feel like I'm in the minority with this one about like hating on the reboot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you seen the newest one or did you not bother?
No.
Because it's
not after the second one.
Yeah. Weirdly, this one Beyond feels the most like an episode of the show, of the original show, though not the Next Generation. So it may still not work for you. But the idea is that it's the stakes are big, but it's still fairly small. It's almost all set on a planet, and everybody's separated, and they have to figure out how to get back together as a crew. It works. It's got a motorcycle in it.
I don't know. I like this where they got like Chagall painting and Spock's quarters, and they talk about it.
Yeah,
would they have that in like a picture in this era? I feel like it's like a throwback in a way to like a different type of science fiction, at least that I prefer. Mm-hmm. Where they talk about history and other ideas, and it seems like the new ones, I don't know. Yeah. It's just really not about anything. It's just like about being a tent pole, and they're cynically just about, whatever. But I think they may be appealing to just the 12-year-olds within the action, and there's not really much going on else.
I don't know. I think the second one
maybe you read more into it than I do, but
it feels like Into Darkness has a lot more to say about post 9/11 American justifications. But it's certainly not the thread of the film. It's just an idea that's floating around in there, as well as a bunch of stuff from The Wrath of Khan and The Search for Spock and Voyage Home.
I think in watching like Star Trek 6 as someone of that age, like maybe I would have been around 12, certainly would have responded to the action, but also like, the prison planet that they go to is called Rurapente, which is from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and like all kinds of little subtle references like that. I don't know, like I would respond to that, and I don't think that you would necessarily see that kind of attention to detail in that way.
Yeah, that's definitely Meyer though. Like he's
absolutely,
which I can't not do it, which is great. But now that stuff would be dismissed as Easter eggs, and nobody would really think about what it means. Like that's the other problem with contemporary science fiction. It's all
goes part and parcel with science fiction, though. Again.
Yeah, but what I mean is that the idea of referencing the past and putting in allusions and allegory is now just, hey, this thing is this thing. That's where people stop thinking about it. It's like 10 things you didn't know about Star Trek 6.
Right.
In 1991, you could actually just let that stuff simmer. And maybe people would figure it out and maybe they wouldn't. Or maybe 30 years later, they read, like they hear about it somewhere. Hey, that's this thing. But I love that because before the internet, you could actually just have something that was a pleasure for yourself. Mm-hmm. You could just experience something, even with an audience, but it's still your own experience, and it doesn't have to be immediately shared or validated or compared. And these movies were very much made for a pre-internet world.
Yeah.
Like they're just self-contained.
Kind of at the end of that era, right?
Yeah.
91 and that.
I mean, even... I don't think the net was what it is now until maybe 2000. But like
the Sandra Bullock movie?
Yeah, that's right. That was just a few years away. You could order pizza.
The net just isn't what it was back then.
Yeah. It's weird though.
Erwin Winkler's masterpiece. I saw that in the theater, by the way.
Oh, so did I.
Yeah, the old York.
Highland.
Oh, the Highland.
A blessed memory.
That's a lovely old theater.
They're all gone now.
They are.
I saw. Where did I see Star Trek 6? The Cumberland 4.
Okay.
In the La Reserve, in the old basement one. So it's probably in 70mm. It might have been the last thing like the last 70mm Star Trek, definitely.
Star Trek 6 was done in 70mm? Are you serious?
In 70mm.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, 70mm blow up was a thing. 70mm blow ups were a chance to charge. This is you kids today.
Back then, really?
In the 80s, probably even in the 70s, but definitely in the 80s and into the early 90s, you would see most major studio releases would be released in 70mm.
You're blowing my fucking mind. I've literally never heard this before.
They weren't shot that way. They were blow-ups. But
is it like a movie that wasn't shot in 3D that is like badly put in?
Yeah, no, they were blown up. It was simply, for the most part, it was because of multi-track audio. That's how you got a stereo soundtrack.
It's not like Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet or something.
No, that was shot in 70mm. Oh, yeah. Camera 65, I guess it was. But yeah, no, Star Trek. I think I've seen. Yeah, I would be willing to bet. I'm almost positive I have seen all 6 Star Trek movies in 70mm, because I know...
Well, 1, 3, and 5, I mean, really demand to be seen in 70mm.
I know I saw Star Trek 3 in 70mm because it was at the Hollywood. Star Trek 4, at least one of the times I saw it would have been at the university, I think, maybe? No. The Uptown, but definitely a big 70mm room. And at the time, it was only 50 cents more to see a 70mm engagement. No one.
Man, those are the days. Like back then, $4.25 for a matinee, $8 for an evening show. Yeah. You know, at the Eglinton.
$6.50 when I was a kid.
I mean,
going to see.
You can't beat that shit.
No, and you saw the movie in a proper movie theater. I mean, there's some decent houses in the city, but the Uptown one, the Eglinton, the Highland one, the Hollywood South, those were palaces. Yeah, Star Trek. It's weird to be talking.
Yeah, it's a Star Trek 6.
But just in terms of Star Trek 6 is now its own kind of niche, right? Like, because Star Trek has moved on. Even the franchise kind of looks back on these things fondly, but not as, and they're not as important. They don't have the weight that they used to. So now, in a weird way, the original cast, original series stuff has become quaint little baubles that people remember fondly, but don't worship the way they do the new stuff, or the excitement around Star Trek Discovery is, I think, a great indicator of where the show is going. People really want to see a new direction. They're less interested in the old stuff, and even the new movies, which are technically the old stuff, are less interested in the old stuff. Mm-hmm. So it is the kind of thing that is held fondly on a shelf by people. And now the dog is snoring because he's not interested in my Star Trek theories. But yeah,
you do need a great villain, and like Christopher Plummer is one of the great ones, and you need. Maybe Q isn't like a villain per se, more like a trickster, but like the Borg.
I think Q, I think people embrace Q because he's a fan.
Yeah.
Show me what you're doing, Jean-Luc. I enjoy watching you play.
It's just fun, right?
Yeah, but he's like. He's the Mary Sue. Like, he's the character that the fans want to be. Omnipotent and puckish. Mm-hmm. And maybe not malevolent, really, because it's a kid playing with his toys. For fan identification, I love watching how Star Trek's fan identification has changed. Like, Kirk and Spock were the original, like, they're the ones you aspire to be. And then with The Next Generation, it took Picard a while to become the hero, the sex symbol, because he was originally supposed to be cerebral and removed and sending the away team down, and Riker was supposed to be the Kirk surrogate, but that just didn't happen, which is no disrespect to Jonathan Frakes. He's very good at doing what he's doing, but the mood of the world was different enough that slowly it was Patrick Stewart who emerged as the one people wanted to see with his shirt off. And
I mean, really? That's incredible to me.
Remember, they came up with reasons for him to be, like, he's got shirtless scenes in the second half, that back half of the series. He's the one where he's held hostage under there are 4 lights. That scene
with David Warner, no less.
Again, yes.
That's a great episode.
As not Gorkon. Is David Warner the only actor who's been in everything, like interacted with every cast?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he's been in everything. Period.
He was in Deep Space Nine.
He's in Straw Dogs, for God's sake. Yeah. The man is well traveled.
He's a veteran. I'd love to sit down and talk to him someday about just anything.
Yeah.
We could talk about like gardening. Because he'd have stories.
Titanic.
Well, time after time.
Yeah.
That's
true.
A film that I am repeatedly shocked. Kate still hasn't seen it. We're going to watch it at some point, and I was like, oh, I must have the Blu-ray. There is no Blu-ray. It's never been released.
Really?
Yeah. Right?
And Malcolm McDowell
was
a soft-spoken, sympathetic hero.
The playing against type Malcolm McDowell, because he is...
Great view of San Francisco as well.
And it's...
definitely made me want to visit there again.
It will always be very special to me because I saw it on one of the days it takes place. The opening weekend is the weekend that the film takes place.
That's funny.
And I saw it at the Bayview Village, which is no longer there either. But I saw it on the Sunday. So it was like my dad took us and we were like, shit, this is happening right now. That was the first time I'd ever experienced that. It was so cool. But it's an amazingly underrated film, and please, if anyone here listening is connected to Warner Brothers, get that shit on Blu-ray. There's no excuse. There's a TV show coming out. There's no excuse for this.
Time After Time?
Yeah.
Really?
Present day reboot, yeah. It's the same premise. H.G. Wells chases Jack the Ripper into 2016, and I think it's in New York, not San Francisco.
So they're rebooting something that was not very successful, I guess. Or...
It did okay at the time. Uh-huh. It was well regarded, and it got Meyer the Star Trek II gig. But yeah, his work is always a little smarter than it needs to be, a little more fun than you'd expect. So he's one of those filmmakers, as far as I understand. People really love working with him, but he just doesn't work that often. And I don't know why.
I like that they pushed the series in certain ways, like introducing this idea of zero gravity, which is not done anywhere else. Yeah, I guess maybe that's the most notable example. And just flipping about expectations about, making the good guys bad guys, especially at the beginning. Taking a premise that is very sort of obvious where it's going to go, but also trying different things. Yeah, I do appreciate that about the movie.
Yeah, for all its fustiness, it does feel like a lively film. Like it's a movie of ideas that didn't need to have them because of the age of
or having Sulu as captain in the beginning would be another one. Advancing the characters in a way, or.
Well, it's just a way to mark time, too.
Yeah.
It would be ridiculous
connecting
if
with Worf in the next series as well.
Yeah. It would be ridiculous if these people had stayed the same. And I guess that's what's so great about the trilogy of 2, 3, and 4 is that it finds a way for Kirk to just sort of fall back down the ladder to where he needs to be. I love the idea that maybe being an admiral is not the thing that he should be doing. He doesn't want to sit behind a desk, which is one thing, but he's also probably terrible at it. Like, Admiral Kirk, it's time for the meeting. I don't want to do that.
The reading glasses.
Yeah, I have a book to finish. I'm writing my memoirs. But to see the ending of 6 does feel like it's time to go. Like we've gotten everything out of this that we can, and it's time to give it over to a new generation. But that's the kind of cheese I'm okay with in Star Trek because I kind of need it at that point.
Yeah, you get Christopher Plummer doing his Shakespeare, and I mean, what the hell else do you want?
Exactly. So the final question on the show is always the same as well, which is what, and this is where you have to explain your opening statement, what of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, has made it into your creative DNA? What have you borrowed or stolen or lifted?
You're making me answer this?
I am, if you can. I mean, if there is a logical progression, I think...
No, I don't know. I was watching TNG, on Netflix as I was editing. I don't think it was more like having somewhere else to go mentally to get away from the heaviness of some of my film, but... I don't know, man.
But that's valid.
It's just something fun. Sometimes you need to
it's your escape valve.
Kick back, yeah.
So how
I don't think there's anything more to it than that.
Do you return to it? More to Star Trek 6 than any of the other ones?
I like 2 and 6 basically. I take them more seriously than the other ones. I find 5 a bad film. 4 is okay, but kind of more cartoonish. 1 is just a snore to me. 2 and 6 I really enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have to leave them, if you have to move on and I guess if the new ones aren't working for you, then are you disconnecting entirely from the franchise, or are you interested in the new show? Will you be checking it out?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know much about it, to be honest. Yeah, I suppose I would, sniff around.
Yeah.
But I kind of just stuck with TNG. I never really watched Deep Space Nine that much, or the other newer shows. But I've gone back to TNG over and over again, and always enjoy the writing, especially, and I guess the acting as well. But I find the writing on TNG especially very underrated and actually extremely sophisticated. not just for its time, but I think that it holds up remarkably well and is deep. And I find that, as I was saying earlier, like so many of the episodes are about dealing with things like death and loss and separation and all kinds of things like that. It's actually kind of, it's not what you think of when you think Star Trek TNG.
Yeah.
Especially watching it as a boy, as I would have initially.
As an adult, to me, it really surprised me that maybe the two best episodes, Yesterday's Enterprise and The Inner Light, are about lives that don't happen. Mm-hmm. They're about like literally alternate timelines and fantasies.
Yeah.
Where things worked out a different way.
Totally. Yeah. And then they're very emotional, actually, too, you know?
Yeah. And then you have Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Which somehow, that's like, you can just see the ghost of Gene Roddenberry going, yay, they did Mark Twain.
And the Drumhead is a great episode, too. I agree with you about the other episodes, which I think are fantastic.
The Drumhead is the one.
The Drumhead is the one with Gene Simmons.
Like the trial of...
Yeah, it's like a sort of like a live TV kind of throwback. I think of it that way. You know, from the 60s. I think it was like very sort of under budget. There's very little sci-fi about it. It's more like a courtroom drama.
Yeah, it's a bottle episode, really. It's a court-martial.
Yeah, and like a, throwback to the Red Scare and paranoia and just extremely well written. And you get someone at the level of Gene Simmons and she's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not really deep insight there, but I mean, again, that they would try something like that in TNG.
Yeah. So, is there something that the show never did that you wanted it to do? Was there something that after 7 seasons that was missing for you?
Huh. I never thought about that.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out if there's a connection between like the sense of potential at the end of Star Trek 6 and the way the show delivers on it.
I don't think so. I gotta say, I never thought of that. I thought that the last episode was great. It was a great way to finish the series. I don't know. No, it never occurred to me, to be honest.
Okay, so you're happy with Star Trek as it is.
I guess.
Now that the reboot is there and that all this other stuff is there, you're content with what you remember, with the stuff that you're happy that you have what you. I don't know how I'm framing this exactly, or I don't know.
You mean what could they do more in the new ones?
Did you get everything
to bring me back as a viewer?
Yeah. Did you get everything you want?
I mean, it just seems so sort of brain dead. What I saw, the new ones. There was nothing... I found very little about the old series at all. The fact that they would rehash, like, plots like that. This is another thing with the new Star Wars movie. Like, can't you fucking come up with something new? Like, it's one thing to reboot a series, but, like, you're actually, like, basically remaking the previous film as well. Like, come on.
Yeah. I didn't mind it with Star Wars because in The Force Awakens, there's this weird poetry to finally completing that thing that George Lucas always insisted on, which is that this is always the story of the Skywalker family, and that the same things happen to the same characters or the same characters' kids because they have to break the cycle. I'm okay with that because it's mythic in a way that reaches back to Campbell and all that.
Yeah, but another Death Star, really?
Well, I love that because they never learn. I love the idea that the Empire doesn't learn. They just didn't build it big enough. That was the problem. What's going to build it out of a planet this time? You'll see. This'll work. Evil fails because they're limited, not because they're, wicked, awesome, smart.
I think you're giving it so much more credit than it deserves. Or like, Khan, again, really? That's where you're going? Really?
Yeah. And I'm sure I've talked, maybe not in the podcast, but I've definitely talked about it somewhere. Oh, I did it. I talked about it on Sam McLean's podcast. The thing that I love about Into Darkness, about Khan, is that when he delivers his big identity, like, my name is Khan. When that happens, the audience responds, but the characters don't, which I think is so great because Kirk and Spock, who the fuck is Khan? We've never heard of this guy.
Right.
And it's even worse for Khan because he's an egomaniac who was a legend in his day. And the idea that no one knows who he is now, I thought that was terrific. I thought that was a really smart use of the mythology, but because everyone gets so distracted by, oh, it's Khan, we knew it was going to be Khan all along, that bit doesn't land. Nobody gets the joke, which is that absolutely no one knows who Khan is. and why they should be scared of him.
And then he goes all Godfather 3 by shooting people through basically a helicopter.
That's the other problem. That's
a comparison you don't want.
Space helicopter. Makes it totally different. But yeah, no, the Godfather 3 thing is, like, again, evil is not particularly imaginative. But yeah, that is kind of dopey. I admit that.
All right. I won that argument, sadly.
My thanks to Hugh Gibson, who'll be down at the TIFF Bell Lightbox this Friday, October 7th, for an introduction and Q&A at the 6:45 p.m. screening of The Stairs. He'll be back at the Lightbox on Wednesday, October 12th, for the 6:40 p.m. show and a panel discussion with Rafi Balian from the South Riverdale Community Health Center, Roxanne Smith, who appears in the film, and Toronto City Councillors Joe Cressy and Gord Perks. The Stairs is an important documentary, and you should see it. Take my word for it. You can follow Hugh on Twitter at Midlamp Films, MIDLAMP Films, all one word, and you can find Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country on DVD and Blu-ray from Paramount Home Entertainment and for sale and rental on iTunes and Google Play. It's also screening at the Lightbox this Sunday, October 9th at 3:45 p.m., so maybe see that and stick around for the evening show of The Stairs? Seems like a good idea. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes, that would be very kind of you. This week's call sign is, "The assassins will surely find a way to dispose of their incriminating footwear." Come on, you can do it. And thanks for listening.